Welcome to History of Canada. We've broken this video module into two parts because there's a lot to cover here. We're going to take you through the beginning histories of Canada up to current day. People started arriving in Canada about 12,000 years ago, and they came from Asia. They crossed the Bering Land Bridge, which a long time ago joined Russia and to Alaska. If we take a look here, this is the top of the earth. There used to be a bridge, and I don't mean a man-made bridge, but a bridge of ice that connected these two continents, and that's how people got to Alaska and into Canada some 12,000 years ago. And one of the first tribes they got there, the picture here, is the Inuit tribe, and there's actually still descendants of the Inuits who still live, and we'll talk about them later, in parts of Canada, and still carry on those traditions in today. So the Inuit people and the people from Asia arrive a long time ago, and then in the late 1400s, early 1500s, Europe gets involved. And at the time, remember, there's no America. Europe is the world power. The most powerful countries all come out of Europe, and two of the most powerful kind of discover Canada, and they start to colonize it, and that's going to be France and England. In 1497, John Cabot, he was an explorer for England. He found what he called New Found Land, very generic name, or Newfoundland, what some refer to it, on the Canada's east coast. And then in 1534, Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River, and he discovered this other area which he in Canada, which he claimed for France. So the French called this area New France. So obviously, you have England and France. They're rivals at the time. They're not best friends. Both kind of claiming areas of France for themselves. So let's talk a little bit about the French when they settled there. It's really important to the history and overall traditions that are still carried on in Canada today. In 1608, Samuel de Champlain, he built the first permanent settlement for the French people in Quebec, and people could come over. Just kind of like in the colonies did it in America, this is what they did in Canada. And the population grew very slowly. The people that came over were mostly people involved with the fur trade. Okay, and the fur trade basically meant you would trap and catch animals, and you would sell their furs for coats, or even the most important thing at the time were hats. And people in Europe loved these hats. Rich people in Europe loved these hats. So fur traders would come over, trap beavers were the big thing, and they'd use their skin to make these hats and then make a lot of money on it. The other thing the French did when they came is they brought their traditions and they brought their religion. One of the sticking points was you could not come to New France unless you were Catholic, and that kind of slowed down some of the people from coming if they didn't believe in that religion. While this is going on, the British were also colonizing and having people move into parts of New France in the southern part. So if you take a look, here's a map, and you can see these were, at the time, 1667, here are our colonies, here's where we are, obviously controlled by Great Britain, and then you could see right here, and this is part of America, and then it moves into Canada, was all the area that was claimed by the French. So these two areas, obviously, we're going to have issues if they're that close to each other, and they're not very good friends. So tensions begin to mount. Yes, tensions over beavers. Yes, it's true. So the fur trade really brought France and Great Britain into a conflict, and they both wanted to have control over it. There's a lot of money to be had, and both sides thought they had the rights to it. In 1713, both sides signed an agreement to try to keep them from going to war. However, didn't really help. They both wanted control of the Ohio River Valley, and some historians will say for different reasons. The French really obviously wanted it for their beaver. They wanted the beavers that were there so that they could sell the fur. The British claimed they wanted the land for settlement, but it was a big sticking point. Neither side really wanted to give in here. And that, among other things, and you guys may have heard of this event, led to the French and Indian War. And that broke out in 1754. Some people call it the 7 Years' War. We call it, usually as Americans, the French and Indian War, because the colonies fought a big role in this as well. Great Britain fought for control of the Canadian territory and the fur trade, and they conquered Quebec during it. Great Britain and the Iroquois Indians, it was versus the French and the Huron Indians. So that's why you get the French and Indian War. There were Native American tribes that were very much involved. And the British won, and they won a decisive battle that helped them win the war. And I know some of you guys have probably heard, like I said, our colonists fought, and George Washington fought in this war. Many American colonists that would fight later in the American Revolution fought with the British because that was the side that we were on at the time. That led to the Treaty of Paris, and I feel like there's a lot of treaties of Paris, but this one in 1763 gave Great Britain the control of all lands east of the Mississippi River, except for 2 islands off Newfoundland that was discovered by the French. And the British forced Nova Scotia's French-speaking people to leave. So they actually made some people go back to France, get out of here, or go to different places. Some went to another colony, which is actually current-day Louisiana, which is another interesting thing. And then in 1774, so now we're almost near the American Revolution, the Quebec Act happened, which the British allowed the French to stay in Quebec, but they controlled the region. So British, by this point, England, Great Britain, controls, remember they control the American colonies, now they also control Canada. Now there's French people still living there, but the British control it all. The Quebec Act guaranteed the French their right to maintain their culture. So the British didn't say, hey, you can live here, but you got to follow all of our cultures. No, they said you can live here, but you can follow your own cultures. So we're going to stop there, and then the next part will pick up at the American Revolution and how that impacted Canada.